Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jessie Haas. I'm the Senior National Director of the Therapy Animal Program at Pet Partners. I want to welcome you to our Facebook Live today. We call it Volunteering with Your Pet. This is really our introductory session that gives you a really nice broad overview as well as some details about joining the therapy animal program with your pet. So volunteering with your pet is really designed primarily for folks who are interested in joining Pet Partners or are maybe already a few steps into the process. Generally, the information is not designed for current volunteers. This is information most of y'all already know. But if you are a current volunteer and you're here listening, by all means, stay. We love having you jump into the comments, share your experiences that relate to what I'm talking about in terms of information. You can really help us personalize this and tell a better story of being a volunteer with Pet Partners. So everybody is welcome to hang out. In just a second, I will go over the agenda and how we're going to spend the next 20 or 30 minutes. While I'm doing that, I would highly encourage you, if you don't mind, to jump into the comments. Let me know what kind of pet you have. I'm mostly interested in species, so dog, cat, rabbit, horse, whatever it may be. But if you want to share your breed, if you have a dog, that is also totally okay. Love reading those as well. And if you could also say where you're from. That really helps me ensure that I am getting the right information into this presentation, if I know where you're from and what kind of pet you have. So please feel free to type that in as I'm talking. In terms of our agenda, I always like to start by giving some context and letting listeners know a little bit more about what it looks and feels like to be a therapy animal volunteer together with your pet. So what kind of facilities do you go into to visit and to share your time and your pet? What do those visits look like? How do you interact with people? I feel like that kind of starting point is always helpful because then when I get into the details, which is what most people want to hear about, those details being things like what are the requirements, what kind of training, what does the evaluation look like? If I share the context first, then I think you can better understand why it is that we have the requirements and training requirements that we do. So that's how we will go about this. I see some folks typing in comments. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hi, Jill from California with a Labradoodle. Maria, I see you there. Thanks for coming. Wendy, George, Jenny, Jen, thank you. So I'm seeing all dogs so far, which is normal. About 94% of the pets that are registered with their handler as a team with Pet Partners are dogs. I will show you a little bit later the other accepted species as well. And I see we've got folks from kind of all over the place, west, east, middle of the country. Wonderful. This is really helpful for me to see. I see Pamela as well has typed in. So thank you again for coming. Oh, Melissa, we have guinea pigs. Okay, great. So that's good to know. We've got some less common species with us. And a donkey. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to get started. Let's go to the first slide. And people can still keep typing in who you are, where you're from, what kind of pet you have, and I'll continue to look at those as they come in. So when I talk throughout this presentation about a team, a therapy animal team, I am referring to you as a handler together with your pet. 1+1, you create a team. I just want to be really clear because sometimes there's confusion that I'm talking about a team, like a group of people going to a facility with their pet. But I'm talking about the one-to-one relationship and teamwork between you and your pet. So our therapy animal teams go out to facilities or institutions in their communities, and they generally go for 1 to 2 hours at a time. And it's an opportunity to share the healing power of the human-animal bond. We know that when pets are shared with others, this has positive health benefits, mental benefits, emotional benefits, and educational benefits for the folks who are visiting. And some of the institutions and facilities that our teams go to are listed up on your screen. I'll allow you to read those. This is just a small sample. Our teams visit thousands of facilities a year. Many do fall into these categories, some do not, but I did want to give you a sense of sort of the breadth of places people can go. And as you can imagine, the client types, if you will, at each of these facilities is going to be a little bit different, right? In libraries and K through 12 schools, there's an opportunity to interact with children and very young adults. If you're looking at universities, obviously also young adults, retirement homes will be older adults. So lots of different client types with whom you can interact as well. And that's something we'll talk a little bit about later in terms of ensuring you know what your pet likes best in terms of different populations they tend to gravitate towards. Let's go to the next slide. So that was a list of places people may go with their pet, but let's talk about what visits actually look like. The vast majority of our visits are social in nature. It's an opportunity for somebody to interact with you and with your pet. And social visits sounds casual, and many times they can feel casual. They might be lighthearted, but they can have deep impact. Often social visits are an opportunity for somebody to, for example, reduce their isolation and loneliness. In certain facilities, you and your pet may be the only person that they have as a visitor that week. So there can be some really deeply impactful outcomes from social visits, but these are exactly what you might imagine, where you chat about your days, maybe you answer questions about your pet, very social in nature. On the other end of the spectrum, some of our teams visit in much more formal or structured settings, such as pairing up with a physical or occupational therapist. So imagine a situation where you're visiting a rehab center. There might be a physical therapist working with somebody who is recovering from a surgery or an accident and needs some work on their fine motor skills. Maybe you visit with your cat or your dog. You have a brush that you bring along, and the person has the opportunity to work on some of those fine motor skills by brushing your pet, right? So in this case, the physical therapist or whatever other professional may be certainly has kind of leadership over the visit in terms of how their client interacts or what their client may get out of it, but you are their partner in terms of bringing your animal in as a way to get to some of those outcomes. A lot of our teams participate in reading programs or literacy-based visits. We have a program within Pet Partners called Read With Me. This is for individuals, teams who really enjoy reading with children or those who may be learning to read for the first time, even if they're a little bit older. What we do know is that many folks are motivated by the opportunity to read to a pet, and they are more likely to want to practice when there is a pet in front of them. And a pet also feels, particularly to children, very non-judgmental. So it can reduce people's or children's concerns about reading out loud. There have been a lot of studies to support that when a child particularly reads to an animal, it will lead to better outcomes than if that child practiced reading on their own or only with another human. So lots and lots of our teams participate in Read With Me or other reading programs. Finally, other visits are really set up to be a stress break, to relieve the stress of the people with whom you're interacting or visiting. So consider going to a university during finals week or during the week that freshmen are moving in and leaving their families for the first time. Being there with your pet is an opportunity for them just for 5 or 10 minutes to take a breather, to enjoy all the good feelings that they may get from interacting with a pet. And of course, using that university example, this is a situation where otherwise they may not have access to a pet. Stress breaks can also occur at airports, of course. They can occur in workplaces. So lots of different facilities and client types can fall under this stress break category, but it certainly is something that a lot of facilities that request Pet Partners teams are specifically looking for. We know we have a highly stressful week. We know we have a highly stressed population. We would love to invite your teams in to help us work on that with folks. So I'm going to stop there. I will just say, sorry, briefly, of course, just as with the last slide, This is just a sample. There are other types of visits that occur, but I want to give you a sense of what some of the most common visits are. I'm going to hop over to the comments and see what else has come through. So Melissa, just letting you know, we do not register reptiles. To answer your last question about fine motor skills for therapy, we will be talking about accepted species in just a second. Otherwise, I don't see any comments or questions coming in. Please feel free to type in questions as you have them. So let's go to the next slide. Perfect. Here's our accepted species, so you can see them listed up on the screen. I mentioned at the top of the presentation that dogs are certainly the most common species that we have registered with pet partners. Cats and horses come next, so they're kind of listed in order here, and then rabbits and guinea pigs after that. But we love what we call our less common species, our non-canines. And the reason for that is in certain settings and with certain populations, other animals are actually better received. I mean, you think about things like allergies or certain people who might be fearful of animals, or excuse me, fearful of dogs. Now we have the opportunity, or you have the opportunity to say, hey, I'm a therapy animal team with my guinea pig, and suddenly they get the opportunity to participate maybe in a way that they can't with canines. So all of these species are welcome, and they all have their own unique abilities and traits that make them special. Let's go to the next slide. So I hope I've given you a decent sense of where you would volunteer with your pet, what it might look like. Let's talk a little bit about your commitment. So first of all, you arrange visits yourself. We don't place you in a facility. We don't say, hey, you need to go every Monday from this hour to that hour at this facility. You really get to decide not only where you visit, but when you visit. For some volunteers, it might be twice weekly. For other volunteers, it might be just once a month. And for others, it might only be 4 or 5 times a year. So it just really depends on your schedule, your availability, and also what the facility needs or wants. And in terms of finding a facility where you might visit, there's a number of different ways to do that. I'm going to highlight a few. First of all, on our website, once you are a registered volunteer, on your volunteer center homepage, and if you have begun a registration with us or done any digging around, you may have already created a volunteer center account. This is where you manage everything related to your relationship with pet partners as you go through the registration process. But also, once you are registered, the volunteer center continues to have tools like the opportunity to look for a facility where you can visit. So you can type in your zip code and you can see all the facilities in your area that have requested a pet partners team or have requested multiple pet partners teams. So that's one way to find a facility to visit. My only caution with that is lots and lots of facilities who welcome pet partners teams don't advertise on our website. They may find that they already have enough pet partners volunteers at that time. They may have other ways that they locally recruit, or they may be unaware that they can advertise on our website. But it is a good starting point for a lot of folks to see what is out there in their community that has specifically asked for a team. Another way that you can find a facility is to ask yourself. So somebody mentioned that when the mother was in memory care, there was a therapy animal that came in, and maybe that sparked your interest in doing yourself. Same thing, you know, if that's maybe a facility that you would like to go back to and kind of pay it forward, you certainly can contact them and say, I'm now registered with Pet Partners. You can show your registration, you can show your insurance, and they might at that point, of course, invite you in. So you can also make those personal connections yourself. Finally, we do have what we call community partners in some local areas. Not every local area has a community partner. You can consider this, of course, a group of volunteers that work together. It's a partner with pet partners, but in a specific community. So these volunteers work together. They may send out via email to their membership list, you know, here's the upcoming opportunities. And facilities that are looking for teams, so you can also find out that way. If you're interested in seeing if there's a community partner in your area or a community group in your area, you can also search for that in your volunteer center account, which, as I said, is something, if you haven't created already, I highly encourage you do so, since so many resources and every step of the process is outlined for you in the volunteer center. But at the end of the day, you get to decide where you visit and how often you visit. You always want to keep in mind that it isn't just the visit itself that requires your time and your pet's time. Let's say you go to the library for an hour every Saturday morning to participate in a reading program they may have there. Well, you also need to consider getting your animal groomed before that visit, making sure they are clean and healthy and all of that. That can take some time. And then after a visit, even our most veteran therapy animals are often quite tired. So you want to make sure you build into your schedule the opportunity for them to go home, to relax, to go for a kind of a stress-free walk, whatever it is they need to unwind. So as you're thinking about how much you want to commit, just make sure you keep in mind there are some pre and post visit elements that might pressure your schedule just a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. So at this point, I'm going to pivot to talking about what makes an animal eligible, what we look for in handlers, and what the requirements are for the program. So if what you've heard so far is interesting and you think, yes, that would work for me, yes, that would work for my pet, this is now where you can start to think about, are you actually eligible and is this the right fit? So in terms of requirements, pocket pets, that refers to our rabbits, guinea pigs, and rats, our smaller pets. I know we have at least one guinea pig handler on the call. They must be at least 6 months old before they can register with Pet Partners. All other animals must be at least 1 year old. Birds must have lived in the owner's home for at least a year. All other animals must have lived with the owner for at least 6 months. So what that means is maybe you adopted a 3-year-old cat from the Humane Society. That's great. It meets the age requirements, but the cat doesn't necessarily become eligible in terms of the home requirement until 6 months. So they have to meet both. They have to meet the age requirements and how long they have lived in your home or how long you have known the animal. All animals must be reliably house trained. Waste collection devices are not allowed, with the exception of flight suits for birds. So yes, all species must be reliably potty trained. All animals must be on a leash at all times. And again, this extends to all species. It isn't just for dogs or horses who may have leads. It's also for smaller pets. So if you're just beginning this process and you have the type of animal that maybe isn't as accustomed to a leash, that is something you're really going to want to start introducing and getting them comfortable with. Animals may not be fed a raw protein diet. Animals cannot have had a history of aggression towards other animal or people. And then for the safety of the animal for the safety of your animal and the people you visit, we want your animal to be in good health. Just to pause on that for a quick moment in terms of their health. We do have many animals in the program who might have a disability. For example, their hearing might not be great, or they may not have hearing at all. We also have animals who have maybe experienced a limb amputation. So just because your animal isn't picture perfect in terms of their health does not mean they cannot participate. What we want to make sure of is that, of course, for infection prevention and control, they aren't carrying any diseases or illnesses. But we also want to make sure that therapy animal visitation is comfortable for your pet, given what their health or physical needs might be. Pet Partners does not see our animals as tools to use. We believe deeply in animal welfare and well-being, which means we not only, of course, want the pets in our program to be well fed and well exercised and obviously have a wonderful home, but also we want to make sure those animals have the opportunity to consent to this kind of volunteerism and to enjoy it. That's the animal well-being part. So with any of our medical exclusions, it's usually for one of two reasons. Either they aren't healthy enough to not present an issue for the patients they might be visiting, or students or clients, or the other reason might be because the condition makes visiting uncomfortable for them. Some of our animals as well are on medications, but some medications are not allowed. So if you have an animal who is on a maintenance dose or a long-term dose of a medication, or if you have an animal that has a health issue that maybe they've lived with and will continue to live with, please reach out to us before you get too far in the registration process. We'd be happy to talk about your specific animal's health issue before you've invested too much time. And then we're going to talk about obedience skills in just a moment. So let's move to the next slide, and I am going to check the comments. Oh, great. Marcy's here. Marcy's a rabbit and a dog handler. So we have a guinea pig handler on the call, Marcy, so somewhat similar. I see a couple of questions here. So George asked, do I need to wait until the pup is 1 year old before I can set up a volunteer center account? No, that's a great question, George. You can begin the volunteer center account whenever you're ready. If we haven't dropped the link in there yet, let's do that for folks who don't have an account. You can even take care of some steps as well. For example, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, you do have to take a required handlers course. This course does not involve your animal. You can complete that course tomorrow if you wanted to, George. It's just that until your animal is 1 year old, you cannot complete the process or take an evaluation of you and your pet, but you can start taking baby steps in that direction. The next question is, what test is needed? We are going to talk about the evaluation a little bit later, so I'm going to ask you to hold that one, and we will go through a little bit what it looks like. So in the last slide, I talked about kind of the nitty-gritty requirements, but now I want to talk about sort of Therapy Animals 201. What makes a therapy animal successful? So therapy animals, of course, need to be people-oriented, sociable, and friendly. But I always like to remind people that means with strangers and with a wide variety of people. So I have a dog who is super people-oriented, sociable, and friendly once she gets to know somebody, right? And that kind of animal may not be appropriate for therapy animal volunteerism because a lot of people your pet will encounter will be strangers. Of course, they need to have good basic obedience skills. And these are specific to each species. So for dog, you can imagine those are going to be things like sit, down, come when called. But we also have species-specific obedience exercises for the other species. So if you would like to know more about what those are, you can go to the Volunteer Center. In your homepage of the Volunteer Center is resources. It's a big box you can click. If you click that and type in your species, you can get all sorts of good information. So if you are a rabbit handler, it will show you what does the rabbit evaluation look like. What are we looking for in this particular species? There's a behavior packet specifically for rabbits. So I would encourage you to avail yourself of those resources in terms of better understanding the obedience skills, particularly for non-canines. The third bullet there kind of relates back to the first in that therapy animals need to remain calm and be comfortable being touched by others. So of course, again, that means strangers, but the calm part is also really important. Some animals are super people-oriented, sociable, and friendly, but also that can cause like almost too much excitement, and they have a hard time remaining calm. That doesn't mean your animal can't be excited, they can't wag their tail, they can't give that big smile and the butt wiggles. All of that is okay, but they also need to be calm enough not to jump, not to force interaction with the person if the person isn't interested. So that calmness is also important. And of course, we talked about non-aggression already. The reason why we are very careful about non-aggression towards other pets is because in many facilities, there will be other types of animals. Think about going to the airport. There might be security animals or TSA animals. Service animals or assistance animals can be present. And as therapy animals become more and more common in a variety of places, you might also encounter other therapy animals. So that non-aggression and that calmness when other animals are present is also really important. Just one other thing I'll say here, and then we'll move on. The basic obedience skills, it's really important to consider how reliable your animal's obedience skills are when distracted or when in a new environment. So I'm sure a lot of us have experience with animals who will do everything we request that they do at home or in our own neighborhood, but suddenly you take them on a new trail or into somebody else's home, or when something really exciting is happening around them and they have a hard time following those same requests. With therapy animal volunteerism, very important that they can demonstrate those skills even when stressed or even when in a new environment. And you'll see that a little bit when I talk about the evaluation in a few slides. So let's go to the next one. So I said at the top, a team is an animal and a handler. And you as a handler are as important as your animal, if not more important, because of course you are the one who gets to decide where you go and when you go. You have a lot of power in this situation. And so we want to make sure our handlers are also set up for success, because when you're set up for success, your pet is set up for success. So of course, handlers need to be friendly, professional, and polite. You also will be interacting with a lot of strangers, most likely. We want our handlers to be able to predict and redirect their animal's behavior. So this is very much related to your bond with your animal and being a proactive handler. So getting into a situation and knowing, oh, okay, there's 5 people coming at my pet at once. And while my pet can handle that, I know it means that they get a little agitated. So I am going to redirect my animal, put them in a different position. I'm going to talk to the people coming at my pet about going one at a time. So you can predict and redirect how they might anticipate a situation, but you're also ensuring their well-being in terms of how you direct others to interact with your pet as well. We call that proactive handling. It's very important to the safety and well-being of your pet. We do have training available about some of these things that I just discussed, and I'll talk about those. And then, of course, successful handlers follow pet partners' policies and procedures at all times. I'll give an example of this. So we only allow teams to visit up to 2 hours per day in a facility, no more than that. The reason for that is, even again, for the most seasoned, experienced therapy animal, 2 hours is usually their max limit before they are being fatigued. And I know for some people who have really energetic, friendly, people-oriented dogs particularly have a hard time thinking about their animal being fatigued after 2 hours of just hanging out at the library, but most of them do get fatigued. And again, back to that whole animal well-being piece, we don't want to force an animal to volunteer after they're very tired. So 2 hours is our limit. That's an important policy to know. And as a handler, even if your pet feels great at the 2-hour mark, and even if lots and lots of people at the facility still want to interact with you and your pet, you have to have the ability to say, nope, I need to leave. It's the end of our day here. When I come back next time, I will try to make sure I get to you first, or whatever it is you need to do. But following those kinds of policies are incredibly important for our volunteers. Let's go to the next slide. I don't have too many more. And this is getting to some of what you all have already asked in terms of processes, steps, what do you need to do, evaluation. So up on your screen is not every single step that is involved in your online registration, but these are the steps that tend to take a little bit more time. The other steps tend to be pretty brief and easy. In order to start a registration, you go to the Volunteer Center, the link we just put in the comments, and there's an area that says My Registrations. You click on that, start a team registration, or maybe some of you have already done that. You can go back to your registration and complete it at times that are convenient for you. So it's kind of, you can come and go from the process. But when you do that, you'll see these steps along with a few others listed, and you go right through them and they start checking off as you complete them. The 2 that I want to talk about today are steps 2 and 4, the required handlers course and your team evaluation. I do just want to flag step 3. that you do need to have a veterinarian complete a health screening form about your pet. This can be from a recent visit. You don't necessarily have to make a visit after you start your registration if you just had a recent visit. When you get into the online registration, you will see on that form what the date requirements are in terms of when that visit could have been completed, and then your vet can complete the form. So let's talk about steps 2 and 4 and go to the next slide. So I've already said this a few times, but I'll say it again. We put a lot of emphasis on the human end of the leash, on our handler. And so we require that every handler, when they join the program at the outset, they are a new handler, that they take a therapy animal handler course. This can be done either in person or online. When you get to that step in your online registration, it will direct you to choose one. If you choose the in-person option, it will direct you to a calendar to see if there is one in your area. I will be very honest and transparent that a lot of these in-person options dropped off during the pandemic, and they haven't necessarily returned to normal levels of offering. So even if you're really interested in doing the in-person option, just know that you may have to take the online version. The good news is, regardless of which version you take, our data shows that your success in the evaluation you have to pass with your pet is roughly equal. So one is not better than the other in terms of outcomes. Our handler training does not involve your pet. It is human only. And it goes through all of our policies and procedures. It talks about things like, Melissa put this in the chat, you are your animal's best advocate. That's what I was talking about before in terms of managing interactions, being in tune with your pet, understanding when they're tired, when they're stressed, when they're enjoying something. The course covers all of those types of things. The reason we don't require specific animal training is for a couple of reasons. So we will not ask you to verify that you've taken an obedience course, if you've done this, that, or the other thing. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, animals enter our program at various stages of their life. We have many pets or dogs that join us at 6 or 8 years old. They took obedience classes a number of years ago, and they do have the basic skills to do this already. And maybe all that's required is a little bit of brushing up at home. So we certainly don't want to create obstacles for pets who may not need that type of training. We also believe that once you've taken the handler's course, whether in person or online, you will have a really good sense of the area where your pet might need some work in preparation for evaluation and eventual volunteering. So you can decide at that point what kind of class, formal class, you may want to attend. Maybe you don't want to attend one. We really empower you to make that decision. You know your pet best. The other reason we don't require it is, again, we are inclusive of 9 different species. If you are a guinea pig handler, it is very difficult to find guinea pig training in your community potentially. So we certainly don't want to require something like that, which would then disclude many of our handlers. So you have to take the handler training before you can take the team evaluation. So I'm going to move to that slide next. Actually, I'll pause because I see a question came in from Randy. Do you have a list of local trainers or training programs that are specific for future therapy dogs? No, we do not, because again, we don't require that. And we can't possibly recommend either, because we can't be in all training schools around the country to kind of be able to assess if we recommend them or not. Again, I would encourage that you take the handler course first, see what it is we're asking you to do, and then you can look for a course that fits your needs. Some dog training facilities offer a therapy animal course, and it may or may not line up exactly with what it is Pet Partners looks for, but from what I've seen, they will give you a really nice introduction to some of the skills. So that's an opportunity or an option for you as well. So the evaluation, some people refer to this as the test. Either one is okay, but we call it the evaluation. This is where you and your pet go before a licensed team evaluator in order to assess if you are a good fit for the therapy animal program. The evaluation is 23 to 26 exercises. It's, again, species specific, and also very small dogs like we're talking really small dogs evaluate differently than other dogs, but 23 to 26 exercises. And the first half of the evaluation is species-specific obedience skills. Again, dogs sit down, walk loosely on a leash, come when called. The second half of the evaluation is what we call the aptitude portion. So this is actually evaluating you and your pet's aptitude to be in a therapy animal visitation environment. So we are trying to simulate some of the things that you will see. So in this portion, you will encounter a loud noise that we will create to see how you and your pet might respond to that. Because if you are in a school building, there might be a bell ringing, a very loud bell. We do have people approach your animal and approach you who might be using medical equipment. That's going to be really common in a lot of our visitation settings. We are going to have an exercise where 3 people all come to try to touch your pet at the same time. Again, that's really common in a lot of the environments and situations I described at the beginning. Really important to keep in mind that both you and your animal are scored on every single exercise. So your animal might knock it out of the park and do perfectly, but if you don't, then you as a team will not pass. And what we are looking for in handlers, and you'll learn this in the handlers course very, very clearly, but we are looking for some of that proactive handling, your ability to advocate for your animal, your ability to guide them appropriately, and to be their teammate and their cheerleader and their supporter. And so you aren't ever in an evaluation going to want to stand back and just let people interact with your pet. So just keep that in mind. It's you're 50% of the score and your pet is 50% of the score. About 40% of new teams do not pass the evaluation on their first try. Sometimes this is really simple mistakes. Maybe it's a young animal who's not quite ready, a young dog, and they jump on the evaluator. Unfortunately, that means you don't pass the evaluation. You're not ready that day. And then sometimes those things can be fixed with a little bit of time. Your evaluator will talk to you about what he or she or they saw, ways to improve. For some people, they come back less than a month later and they pass successfully. For others, they might need a couple of months to kind of brush up on some skills. It is not uncommon to get that not ready score, but also there's a lot you can do to increase your chances of passing, and that really is paying very close attention to the things in that course, as well as availing yourself of the resources in our resource library, particularly looking at, if you type in guinea pig or you type in dog evaluation, you can see what's required of you step by step, and adequate preparation would eliminate a lot of these the not ready scores that new teams get. A lot of times it's just not coming in knowing what to expect and making some simple mistakes that if you knew what to expect, you wouldn't have made. I know the evaluation is a source of concern for a lot of people, so if you have any more specific questions on it, please type them in. And let's go to the last, I believe it's the last slide next. Yep. So when you register with Pet Partners, you get some benefits, not only, of course, the benefit of helping people in your community and deepening your relationship with your pet. That's something that a lot of volunteers really love. If you are a current volunteer and you're still here listening and you want to type in your experience with this, but for a lot of volunteers, one of the greatest benefits is their relationship with their pet increases deeply because you're working together as a team and supporting one another. But the actual kind of real hard benefits are listed up on your screen. The one I really want to talk about is liability insurance. So we provide comprehensive general liability for all volunteers that covers you if something goes awry when you're out visiting. Almost every facility will require that you have insurance, and we provide that for you. You don't have to produce your own insurance. We provide that for you. So that's the biggest benefit to keep in mind. I'm going to stop there. I talked a lot longer than I thought I would. I apologize for that. But I'm going to look at the comments here and see if there's any questions. So Ken asked, how can you find an evaluator who will do the evaluation for you? So when you are in your volunteer center account, those steps I showed you for the registration, we tend to use the word registered instead of certified. But so when you think of certification, just replace it with registration. You'll see that in the volunteer center. Every step is listed. And when you click on the evaluation step, it'll take you to a calendar where you can see all of the evaluation events in your area. If for some reason you can't find something in your area, please reach out to us and we will try and help you. Sometimes evaluators just haven't had a chance to get it on the calendar, but you can reach out to them directly. I will say this though, a lot of new handlers are like, okay, I'm ready. I want to evaluate next weekend. Just keep in mind, our evaluators, while they go through extensive training and have all been handlers themselves before, they are also volunteers. So some may only hold events every 3 months, and that is totally okay because they are giving of their time. So just be flexible when you go into that evaluation calendar in terms of realizing you might have to travel 20 miles, maybe 30 miles, maybe 40 miles, and you might have to wait a month or two before you can get in to be evaluated. In fact, a really smart thing is to go in sooner rather than later, anticipate when you might want to evaluate. You know that maybe you don't want to do it until wintertime. You want more time to work on things. You, of course, need to take the course. Then look and see if there's anything posted for January and take that spot. And then that's sort of your internal deadline of making sure you and your pet are ready. Randy asked about a camp that only requires that the dog be therapy dog certified. Are we the only agency? No, we are not the only agency. Of course, I think that we are the best agency. But you'd have to ask that particular camp what it is. They might have only certain agencies they work with. Is the evaluation for the recertification process the same as the initial evaluation test? Great question, Dane. So I didn't talk about this, but I'm happy to now. We do require that every team gets evaluated every 24 months, every 2 years. You do not have to retake the course as long as you are an active volunteer, but you do need to reevaluate. We do that for a couple of reasons. It's a best practice in the industry. Animals age. And that might mean where they were 2 years ago versus where they are now. Maybe it's not as comfortable for them. And we want our evaluators to be able to kind of help handlers see that at times. Sometimes it can be a way to encourage our handlers to brush up. We want to make sure you as a handler every 2 years can demonstrate to us that you are still a great advocate for your pet, that you know how to be a proactive handler, how you know how to support your pet. So you do have to do it every 2 years, and it is the same evaluation. So that's good. When you walk in for your reevaluation, usually it feels a lot more comfortable because you've been there before. Yes, we do register mini horses. So both Ken and Randy, your last few questions here. So again, if you go to the volunteer center, which we dropped a link, if you don't have an account, create one. Once you have one created, there are a couple of different things that get at exactly what you're asking for. So Randy, for you, in terms of looking at evaluation exercises, if you type in, dog evaluation, if you have a dog, it will return for you the resources that you are wanting. So we do have some things documented on paper. We also have some like webinars and YouTube videos that will help you. So that's going to be the best place to find where to put it. Ken, for you, in terms of looking for an evaluator, when you're in that volunteer center account and you hit my registrations, both my registrations and resources are right on your front page. If you hit my registrations, you'll see all of the steps required. One of those steps is the evaluation. And when you're in that area, it will tell you exactly where to go look to see where evaluations are in your area. So we don't necessarily have a direct link to everything you're asking for, but everything will be in your My Registrations area or in the resource area. I hope that's helpful. And yes, my colleague Bree, who's been helpful in the background here, she just dropped in the Volunteer Center link again. I am just going to scroll up real quick, but I believe I got to all of the questions. There was a question here about the upcoming conference. I'm not sure, you might be talking about the AAIP conference, which I don't feel educated enough to talk about right now. I'm sorry, but my email address is right here. If you want to email me, Susanna, and ask me about the conference, I'll make sure to get you to an appropriate colleague to get questions answered on that. And I think I got to everybody. So with that, oh, somebody asked, okay, if it was recorded. Yes, this is recorded. So with that, I am going to say goodbye. I am going to apologize for going about 10 or 15 minutes over what I thought I might. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I really hope many of you join us together with your lovely pets to become therapy animal teams with us. Have a wonderful afternoon.